Kayla Harrison, Holly Holm. Holly was on Ariel's program earlier today. And I felt as though Kayla was there, right? Like there wasn't a single question that Ariel asked. There wasn't any topic that came up with Holly that didn't directly tie into their recently announced bout against each other at UFC 300. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, here's the problem with Kayla. And Kayla Harrison's reality, her version of reality as it pertains to MMA, is distorted in ways that I'm not certain I could even begin to understand. She just had a very unique experience. She had 2 Olympic judo medals. There was a belief by somebody, somewhere, that if you have a female who has an Olympic past that involves medals, that then transitions into the sport of mixed martial arts, that you now have Ronda Rousey Part 2. Like there was somebody somewhere that believed that. That's very different than if you saw what I had just stated and so you came to bring them along with the hope and the thought in mind that possibly they could draw and be like Ronda. It was believed by somebody somewhere as fact that if you had a girl who had a past in judo, who had a medal from the Olympic Games, you had Ronda Part 2. And the pay being to come in structured in the same scenario. Now, I don't suggest for you that anybody did anything wrong. There just isn't any story here. However many times Kayla has fought, she has never made a dollar for the promoter. And that's a tough concept. I know that bothers Kayla on a personal note when people say that. But it's not meant as an insult. It's just meant to attempt to splash some cold water and bring somebody a little bit closer to reality. So what are we doing here? Kayla versus Holly Holm. You have a judo Olympic champion. Holly Holm's got multiple. Well, she got them in boxing, kickboxing, and MMA. Is that right? Has she won world titles, Holly Holm, in all 3 disciplines? I believe so. So, you got world champion versus world champion, right? I mean, this kind of takes you back to the very beginning, to 1993. How would this art do versus this art? And then eventually along the way, you brought in world-class athletes. That is kind of the immersion of the natural Randy Couture. The first time somebody that was a world-class athlete and was going to take their fight inside the octagon from a professional standpoint of training partners, of breaking down footage, of having strategies, of having a game plan, of calories in, proteins in, hours slept per evening. Take it like a professional. So here we are with Holly and here we are with Kayla. To my understanding, is an undercard match. I could have that wrong and they get moved to the main card. Based on the matches we've seen so far, it should be an undercard match. But it's going to be an expensive undercard match. And what do we do? How do we begin to tell a story? The one thing that's been missing. So it starts with the weight class. Far and away, the most interesting thing about the announcement of Kayla Harrison, far and away, is that she was doing it at 135 pounds. I will tell you, I was with a group of people when we read this news. And everybody looked around. Right on. Going to the UFC was the bigger part, far bigger than Kayla herself. The bigger part is where she was going to go, but that's true for about anybody. Holly's a very meaningful opponent. One of the best girls to have ever done it. Quite possibly the best to have ever done it. But then when we found out it was 135, whoa. The table, the group of people I was with, whoa, our eyes got big. We pulled back. Now we've got a talking point. So, generally speaking, when the weight class you're going to fight at is the most interesting thing about your fight, you have a problem. However, it can also be the most important thing, hindsight, looking back. Give you an example. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? There's no story without a good guy and a bad guy. But who do you feel it would be? Everybody that knows anything about our sport likes Holly Holm. There has never been a person ever to yell, boo, in the direction of Holly Holm. Now, we talk about Kayla. She won Olympic medals twice for the country. She represented the United States of America. She got no money for it. She got no fame. She represented the country. Everybody likes her. There has never been a person in MMA at the induction of Kayla Harrison to yell, boo. It's never happened. But if we don't have a bad guy here, we don't have a story, right? Right now I'm wondering, is that going to be main card? Is that going to be prelim? If they're both good, girl, I don't need to wonder where they're going to be. Of course they're going to be prelim. But what happens if Kayla misses weight? What happens? It'll be the first time that Kayla, who defended our country successfully, represented us with pride twice, has done something wrong. And there will be nobody that understands. There will be nobody that pats her on the shoulder if she gets down to 137 pounds. Says, wow, you haven't been that light since you were in the 6th grade. Way to go. You sure wanted it. That's not how this works. If she gets down to anything other than the agreed upon weight, she is now the bad guy. Period. So now you finally do have a story that you can tell. Now you do have the good guy versus the bad guy. Now, just like that, overnight, you have something that is main card worthy. The card's not going to be able to move, but you now have something that will carry and follow those two athletes. Holly Holm, who's wearing the white hat, and Kayla, who's wearing the black hat. Right there, just like that in that moment. But not so fast. Is Holly going to fight her? Is Holly going to go out there knowing the show must go on, knowing that this is 300, knowing this is a sought-after bout, knowing all the things that must have happened to get Kayla contractually, commas, zeros on a paycheck, all the stuff that must have gone into it, and is she going to be the one to say, not happening, not tonight? Well, that's a very personal question. And I watched Holly on Ariel. And I thought that Holly said no. I thought she said no. If she misses weight, I'm probably not going to fight her. And I realized the word probably is not very strong, but this is what I thought I heard. So then I rewound it because I wanted to get the quote perfect for you guys. And then I didn't hear it at all. I couldn't find the quote. I got that sense. And I would not blame Holly. There is massive risks on taking somebody on who has footage of you and you have no footage of them. That's where the great risk is. If they're able to watch what it is you do and study your tendencies and you are not able to watch what they do. We used to have boxers. Boxers would go 10 years. 10 years as champion. 8 years as champion. We now don't have anything near that. And you want to know what changed? Television. When we had the boxers, the heavyweight champion that would be the champion for an entire decade, you were watching that guy box on a transistor radio. You and your buddies would be crowded around a transistor radio. You couldn't have footage of it. The magazines weren't out there. The internet weren't out there capturing this film, sitting down, studying. Wasn't a thing. As soon as that became possible, as soon as scouting became available, you started to see a little bit more of a musical chairs. And we can all take guesses on, is Kayla going to look good or is she going to look great? Or is she going to look not as good and not as great at 135 pounds? But it's just that. It's a guess. We don't have it. It's an experiment. We don't have it. We don't have that footage. We don't know what her speed is going to do. We don't know what her balance and her coordination and her timing are going to do. It's a big risk that Holly is taking. And Holly is loved. And Kayla is loved. And Holly is not willing to crack a few omelets to make an egg. And Kayla sure as hell is not willing. Neither one of them is willing to be a heel. But if Kayla misses weight, all of a sudden things have changed. And now it goes to Holly. Because see, if Holly refuses the fight after Kayla misses, Holly will now be the bad one. If Holly accepts the fight when Kayla misses, Holly will be cheered and revered, and Kayla will not. And it's a very different dynamic. But now all of a sudden, for a girl whose reality is completely distorted in the world of MMA, for the first time ever, will find out it's important when you're fighting that there's a story behind it and that people want to see you fight.